I often lay all the cards out in chapter 1. You know, the siblings that bury a body, you know who did it and you know why, and it's about the aftermath. And Wrong Place, Wrong Time, you know, an 18-year-old murders a stranger outside his house and his mum witnesses it, but she wakes up the day before the crime, and then she wakes up 2 days before the crime, etc. And so it's kind of like a Groundhog Day, but it goes backwards. And I think a little bit like the choice, I had been toying with the idea of a time loop and Groundhog Day and thinking like, this has been done a lot on like celluloid, but it's not been done too much in fiction. And again, there are some more now. And I was thinking like, I think it's because readers don't want to see the same day over and over. Like in Groundhog Day, you can montage, and it's something that you've got to have patience with in literature. And I think that's tough ask in, you know, crime fiction. But then I watched Russian Doll, and I thought, again, like, this is such an interesting format. Like, maybe I could make it work. And then I sat down to watch the news, which I actually don't do particularly often. Like, it was a random choice. And there was a long section on knife crime. And it wasn't the mother of a victim that was being interviewed, it was the mother of a perpetrator. And I immediately found it, you know, in quite a voyeuristic way, very interesting, because she didn't know that her son had armed himself. And then I suddenly just thought, what if she woke up and it hadn't happened, but then she woke up and she's even further in the past, and, you know, she could look in his school bag and see, you know, has he got a knife? And it suddenly just made a curious sense to me to go backwards, because you're not asking the reader to repeat the same day and it might get boring. And, you know, really every time somebody commits a crime, the decision to do so has been made either 2 minutes before they do it, or 2 years before they do it, or, you know, in Wrong Place, Wrong Time's case, she goes back 20 years. But I sort of thought, well, the inception of all crimes is in history. So it really did coalesce in a moment that changed my life, really. I do outline, and I did outline that book, but unlike most outliners, I nearly always delete my first draft, which I did do with that book. So that is my process, and I have done that. I've just done it for the 9th time, actually. I write a really detailed synopsis that I get sign off on, and then I write the book. And during the process, something happens where I think, oh, wait, this book, actually, this is what it's about. And it's usually almost at the end of a first draft, and it changes everything that moment for me. And then I delete. So that is what I do. In the version that is published, Jen lives day 0, crime happens, wakes up day -1, crime hasn't happened, wakes up day -2, etc. In the version I wrote, she revisited day 0 every evening. So she would fall asleep, witness the crime again, and witness all of the effects of the things she had changed. But it didn't work, because the reader, you know, if you go to sleep on day -5 and then it's day 0 and then it's day -6, you're confused and you're like, where have all the other days gone? Did you live them? Like, it was confusing. And she only went back 2 weeks because her son was in a gang. That was the, you know, the answer. Whereas in the published version, she goes back 20 years. So yeah, they're completely different. But for some reason, I can't get to this knowledge by outlining. So I'm like the worst of both worlds, because I have the schedule of a pantser, but I do outline. So I'm very inefficient writer, sadly. I do a book a year, so, but I have an absolute huge crisis every single year, and delete the book and then start again. And it's usually 6 months into my deadline. So there's huge panic. So it is a process, but it's not a good one. So in the first draft, I was really interested in the trait of laziness, and I wanted to write a really lazy character, because I know somebody who's quite lazy and I find her very interesting. And I loved the trope of a woman caught in a time loop, and the way she deals with it is just to watch Groundhog Day and watch Russian Doll and, you know, Palm Springs and all of the things that inspired me. She just is like a couch potato. But it didn't work because she had to have like autonomy and kind of drive to solve the plot, and it was like she wasn't acting in a way that was true to her character. So that completely changed. And then I kind of rewrote her as, she still has some of the traits. She still has quite a lot of like shame about how she lives her life, and she's a very normal person, but she would kind of like, she goes to the gym and she sits in the sauna, but she'll go home and feel guilty about that. So she's not lazy, she's normal, but she kind of thinks she is, and she thinks she's stupid, which was why it was hard for her to be alone in a time loop, having to kind of figure it out herself. But the character definitely got scrapped on the cutting room floor, as well as the plot. So yeah, I eventually got there. You know, I always say it takes me 12 months to write a book, 11 and a half of them are miserable. And the last 2 weeks, I read it over and I'm like, every single year, I think, oh my God, I've dodged the bullet. Like, I've somehow done it. And it almost feels like a coincidence to me. And I think what it is the multiple drafts, because I do like maybe 7 or 8 drafts by myself. The first one trashed, the second one a big rewrite, and then I refine, and then I deliver to agents and publishers. So I'm a prolific rewriter, really. And I think because of the layering, by the time I finally read it, which is only when I'm about to deliver, I think, oh my God, I've managed to do it. But it almost feels like against the odds. I don't know. I think because the process is quite chaotic. It used to be called Deja Vu. Yeah, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, I think, is a bit more of an accessible title because, you know, Deja Vu is a French, you know, phrase, which is not, you know, super easy to type into Amazon with all of the bits about the letters and all of that. So it's, yeah, Wrong Place, Wrong Time was a brainstormed title, actually. Some of them have a title from the beginning that stays, but that one, it's hard to conceptualize the hook, actually, even though it's high concept. There is not a phrase that is like time loop but backwards, like it doesn't exist, that title. So yeah, it became Wrong Place, Wrong Time after quite a lot of different titles were thrown around.